Anton Karas, the third man, as if you don't know that by now. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly, and we have a very special apolitical show today. A little bit of politics. And that is the pictures, by the way, you saw. It's the person we're about to interview, someone I've known since 1980, 1978, got me into cigars. And I used to watch in the lounges of Las Vegas, Reno, and Tahoe. I actually worked with them many times. And that's Pete Bar Beauty. Pete Bar Beauty is one of the most talented performers I have ever seen, and consistent. Such a great act, and a real icon for comedians. I know every comic says, "When are you going to get Pete Bar Beauty? Get Pete Bar Beauty." And I said, "Why haven't I? I've had him on my WBAI show before, 3 or 4 times. The most recent was the tribute to Professor Irwin Corey. But yeah, he's really special. In fact, this is going to be a 2-part conversation. Today, you're going to see part 1, and he's going to tell you some great stories. And he really is fascinating. And like I said, he had a big influence on me. I don't know if you'll admit that, but he really did have a big influence on me. And I worked at lounges for years in Las Vegas, and watching Pete Bar Beauty, gave me some structure and some discipline that I never really honed. I'm not that structured and disciplined on stage. I haven't performed in like a year. All right, so let's just get right into it. We're going to go right into Pete Bar Beauty. This is the theme, not the theme song, but a lot of the interstitial or the segue music to bring on the comedians on the Tonight Show. And it is Cute. That's the name of the tune, Cute, by the late, great Neal Hefti. We'll be right back with Pete Bar Beauty. Cute by the late Neal Hefti. When I did the Tonight Show one time, that was the music that brought me out, and it brought out most comedians, including my special guest today, my mentor. Not that he'll lay claim to that or want to, but the great Pete Bar Beauty, coming to us from Las Vegas, Nevada. Great to see you, Pete.
Thank you, Randy, and you too, buddy.
So are you sheltered in? Do you go out? What's happening there in Vegas?
I go out once in a while. We had a standing breakfast meet with Shecky Green and Pat Cooper and Gene Kilroy, Muhammad Ali, the late Muhammad Ali's manager, and a whole bunch of other people. But that's kind of whittled down to once in a while now. So
Nice.
we don't get out much now.
You don't? Yeah. Well, do you wear a mask when you go out?
Yeah, always.
I see. Good. All right. Well, how's the city doing, by the way, right now, financially? Are the casinos open?
Yeah, some of them are. They just opened. I think the Mirage just opened. Some of the others are open, and they have a temperature check as you walk in, an automatic thing. You're not allowed in without a mask, and they keep an eye on everybody. So I think everything is sterilized. They've taken out every other slot machine, And same thing with the table games. You can only seat so many people. They're doing the social distancing as much as they can and doing the best they can. But people are still coming. People want to come here, and they're coming.
I see. Well, I can't imagine playing blackjack, without a full table. I like having a
Yeah,
full table, but or playing poker. I mean, how do you play poker? You got to have, a four-man poker game, right?
yeah,
On one of those
yeah.
tables.
Well, the
So,
poker at the where we have breakfast, which is one of the station casinos, the Green Valley Ranch, the poker room is closed.
yeah. Well, I
So I
guess
don't.
it'd be real easy to have a poker face with a mask on, so everyone would
Yeah,
have basically a poker face, right?
yeah, really, yeah.
Would everyone's at the same disadvantage. Um, at any rate, Pete, things have changed. You've been in Las Vegas since, I guess, 1951, 52,
No, 1960, January
1960.
the 1st.
1960. Did you go straight there from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where you grew up?
No, we worked a gig in with the Millionaires. We worked a job in South Bend, Indiana, and then we had the car loaded. It was out back, and so we took our stuff out, put it in the car, and left that same night for Vegas.
What the whole group did,
Yeah, yeah, there were four of us in the group. We had two cars.
and your kids? How many kids did
Well,
you?
after I was here for a while, Randy, actually, we checked into a little motel on the strip, the Colonial House. That's where a lot of people stay. That's not there anymore, and things didn't go very well. But I was enamored with the city because it was the first place that everything was open 24/7. Usually where we'd work, we'd get off work at 2 in the morning, and there was nowhere to go and nothing to do after that. The only place to eat was like the Greyhound bus station, and that was almost inedible. And so it was, you couldn't, by the time we got up, the bank was closed, the shoe store was closed, the cleaners were closed, the post office. And so here everything was open 24/7, and it was like a miracle. So I fell in love with that.
Yeah, including the house of prostitutions, or house of prostitution, and the little chapels to get married.
Yeah,
So, were you working a lot on the road, or were you ensconced in New Orleans with the Millionaires?
yeah, we no, we were on the road all the time. We worked 51 weeks a year, every year, and we were on the road all the time. Usually 2 weeks, and then they'd usually pick up our option. It was a pretty good group, so it was sometimes 4 weeks into town, and in those days, there was a place to work every 200 or 300 miles, and so it was easy to close on Saturday and travel Sunday, and then open Monday again.
Now, when you got to Las Vegas with the Millionaires, how long did you play with them before you broke off onto your own?
Well, let's see. We got here in '60, and the group reorganized in late in '61. That's when they put together the larger group. It was six musicians and a girl singer. And wait, let me get rid of the cat first.
All right, so I love that, man. That's a nice cat there. So,
And then that group broke up like overnight for no reason at all. Just everybody, last job we worked was Lake Tahoe, and Maynard Sloat was our manager, and
no kidding.
yeah, and Maynard flew in and said, "You're aware of the problems?" I said, "No, there aren't any problems. Everybody's happy." And he said, "No, we got some problems," and the problems went on, and they got a little bit worse, and everybody just went their own way. And then I was really in trouble because I had signed for the uniforms and the girl singers' gowns and everything, and so I was on the hook for all that, and I had to stay out of work because I had to be ready to reform the group when we got to that point. And then after a couple of weeks, the trombone player had to take a gig because he was losing his car, and then the bass player. You remember Snake was in the group, the bass
Oh,
player.
really?
Yeah,
The
he
guy
was
that sang Godfather too. He is
yeah,
in the
right.
band up in Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, he was on that band too, and the late Richie Madison, who was a brilliant arranger and player, and Mike Wooford, a great piano player from San Diego. I run into Mike all the time, but The drummer passed away, a kid named Clay Campbell. The trombone player passed away, and Richie passed away. So 3 out of the 7 are gone.
So how long did it take you to become a one-man act?
Well, yeah, I was. We were in a rented house in Vegas up near Charleston Heights, and we had three kids and one on the way, or actually the fourth was just born. And I went to see Frank Ross from the Mary Kay Trio, and Frank said, "You got to get away somewhere where no one has ever seen you, and you got to start over as a single." And I was terrified, you know. So I said, "Well, whatever." So he put me in touch with an agent, George Burke from California, and George got me a gig in Spokane, Washington. I never even heard of it, and I didn't have the money to get there. And so I said to George, "Send me a money order, a bus ticket." And unfortunately, it took so long for the bus to get there that I didn't get the money order in time. And so George bowed out. He said, "Look, call the guy in Spokane. I have nothing to do with this." So I called the guy in Spokane, John Powell, and John fronted me the money for airfare. It was, I think the airfare in those days to Spokane was $319, and I was getting 300 a week. So I was $19 in the hole when I got there, and it was the worst fiasco of my life. I mean, I was depressed because the group broke up, and it was such a great group. We did an album for Capitol already, and I mean, we were going. It was just so good. Other groups would come in and apologize for, musically for this group. We were so strong. And so I flew to Spokane, and John picked me up at the airport. It was raining, it was cold, it was February, and he drove me out to this club. It's called the Stockyards Inn, which would imply it's a steakhouse, but it was named that geographically. It was in the middle of the stockyards. So it's raining, drizzly, cold, and I'm walking with John Powell across the planks, across the steer guano, and we got to the club, and I looked up, and he had a big sign said "Direct from Las Vegas," and he misspelled Las Vegas. It was like God saying, "Not yet, buddy." And I went in a room there. It was a rectangular room, decent size. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, a piano bar would be the simplest thing." And he never heard of a piano bar. So he said, "What's a piano bar?" So my description was simple, because I knew what it was, and I assumed everybody in the world knew what it was. So I said, "Well, it's like a piano, and then it's got a bar built around it so that you can talk to the people while you're playing." He said, "That's a great idea." So I went in that night to the gig, and he had an old upright piano that was barely playable up against the wall, and he built a bar around the back of me. So the people were looking at my back. There were like 8 seats at that bar, and I couldn't talk to them, and it was just terrible, man. I would go in the men's room and cry. It was awful. And so I kept doing it, and I started to pick up little local things and work them into the act, and the crowds got bigger. And then I said to the guy who owned the place, Rocky Rothrock, I said, "Rocky, you know what? Maybe if I had a light over that end of the room, it would set things off a little, So he said, "Hey, that's a good idea." So he hung a cord down from the ceiling, and he got a 100-watt bulb and a shade like in a pool room over the bulb, and hung it over there. And I turned it on. It was like everybody would go, "Whoa," it was a blaring bright light. So I fixed that up a little, and then I said, maybe if we had a microphone there. So he got me one of those little microphones like Broderick Crawford, Highway Patrol, the little mic on a stand. And I'd set it on the piano next to the keyboard, and I'd play a little, then again. And so I started to get into some controversial things, and the joint was packed, it was jam packed. And so John Powell said, "I'm going to get you more money." So he went to Rocky, and with the three of us standing there, Rocky Rothrock said to him, "Yeah, the bar is up. The bar is way up. We're doing big business at the bar, but we'd rather sell food than liquor." And when I heard that, I just pulled John away. I said, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, food is, you're lucky to make 10% on food, especially in those days. But liquor, you pour one drink, it costs a quarter, and you charge $4. It's all profit, no spoilage, no storage. It's everything. So John got me booked at a place across town called the Plantation Club. And the guy who owned it, his name was Perry Williams, this sweet guy. But Perry said to me, when you work for me, you'll have a band behind you. I said, great. So the band consisted of an organ player named Tony Pasco, and everything he played sounded like you should roller skate to it. I mean, everything just had the same sound. And the rest of the band was a drummer who was Perry Williams, the owner of the club. And so opening night, here I am with a bad organ player and an amateur drummer, and I'm out singing an opening song like "Lady Be Good" or something, you know, or "The Lady Is a Tramp." And right in the middle, the drum stops. And so I'm in show business. I'm not going to turn around and say what happened. So I just keep going. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Perry, the drummer, walking to the front of the restaurant, picks up two menus, and he seats two people. You know, in the middle of the act, my drummer was seating people. So it was just like, it was just horrible. But I kept going through. And then it was 62, and that was the year of the World's Fair in Seattle. And John got me booked into a place in Seattle that was right downtown. It was a hot place called Rossellini's 410. And Victor Rossellini, the guy that owned it, was maybe the best restaurant guy in North America. He was a genius. And Victor liked me, and so he set me up in this little lounge, and it was 4 shows a night, 4 45-minute shows a night. So I had a trio behind me, and it was back in show business. And that's, you know, when everything started to happen. And then John Powell said to me, we have a chance to do a TV show for the opening of a new savings and loan, Lincoln Savings and Loan in Spokane. The guys who own it are good friends and big fans, so they want you to do it. It'll be an hour show, a variety show. He said, and you'll have to write it. You'll have to write the sketches, and you'll have to write the music for the band, and you'll have to, you know, write the music for the girl singer. And, you know, so it was like a laborious task. I said, what does this pay, John? He said, it doesn't pay anything, but we can get a copy of the tape. And so I did it, and I was working at Rossellini's. I'd get off work, go home, sleep a couple hours, get up, fly to Spokane, work for about 5 hours, fly back, sleep for an hour on the plane, then go to work, and 6 nights a week at Rossellini's. So after about 10 days, we taped this, and John took it down to the Steve Allen show. And he showed up. John was a little guy. He had like blonde, kinky hair and big horn-rimmed glasses. I mean, he looked like a Casper Milquetoast guy. And he had this big roll of tape with him. So he showed up at the Steve Allen show, and he said, I'm from Spokane. And the writers thought he was like a character. So they started to write him into, you know, different routines. And he was there for days just hanging out with that tape. And finally, they got bored with him. So they got Jerry Goldstein, who was at the time just starting off. He later became a pretty good producer, manager. But they gave Jerry a jacket, a Westinghouse jacket, and they gave him a cigar and a pair of glasses, and they said, go get rid of this guy. So Jerry went out to get rid of John Powell and this tape. And he said, I'm the associate producer. They was putting him on. They were watching him from backstage. It was like a joke. So John kept saying, well, why don't you just look? So Jerry took the tape upstairs, and they played the first like 15 minutes of the tape. And Jerry went and got Milt Hoffman, the producer. And they played some more of the tape, and they got Steve Allen and the writers, and they watched the tape. And I got called like 2 days later to go down and do the Steve Allen show. So
wow.
it was just one of those things, you know. And Nat Cole saw me on the Steve Allen show, so he booked me, and I went on the road with him for a couple of years.
So you were living in Vegas at the time, or now living in Seattle?
Yeah. Well, I was living in Seattle, but when I went on the road with Nat Cole, I moved back to Vegas because the Seattle airport is only open like 4 hours a year, you know, because of the fog and the rain. So I had to be where I could travel with Nat.
How long did you work with Nat?
Almost 2 years, I think it was, but we were inseparable. The deal was I flew with him first class everywhere, and the rest of the troupe was 16 singers and dancers, and the musicians. They all traveled by bus and truck, they call it. The truck had all the lighting and sound equipment and everything, and we worked every town in the north because it was 1963, and the South was still segregated, you know.
So what happened when you did work the South? Did
We
the
worked one southern town, we worked Louisville after working all the northern towns. And I used to do a routine in there where I'd do a conversation between Bobby Kennedy, who was the Attorney General, John was still alive, between Bobby Kennedy and Bull Schrader, the police sergeant down in Selma, Alabama, who sicked the dogs on them, on Martin Luther King. I would do this conversation. I did a decent Bobby Kennedy, you know, and Bull Schrader was just a redneck. So, and the capper of the joke, the punchline, was that the head of the Alabama Police Department was a police dog, you know, and so that was the joke. Anyway, I do this whole thing, and Nat said to me, we got to Louisville, Nat said, incidentally said, I'm assuming you're taking out that routine. And I said, yeah, I won't do that. And then the guys in the band all came to me and said, hey, whatever you do, do not do that routine, man, because they got to come across the pit to get to you. And we don't want to be in the middle of this riot and everything. And so anyway, Nat said, here's the comedy star of our show. And he introduced me and I went out and I was doing my regular stuff. And then I figured, to hell with it. So I went into that routine and all the guys in the band, I could see the sax players put the cap on their horn, packed up their instruments. The drummer got all of his sticks. They were ready to take off, man. And the audience, I looked out, half the audience was sold to the general public, was all white. And there was an aisle up the middle, and the other half was sold to a black university in Louisville. So that was 100% black. So the audience was totally divided, not a different person on either side. And up the middle were about 4 overweight redneck cops just standing there. So I get to the punchline and there's a pause of about 5 seconds, which felt like an hour, nothing, silence. And then one of the cops start laughing, then another guy start laughing. And finally the audience started laughing and they start clapping and everything. And I turned there and walked off. And I just remember Nat walking by me. And the only thing he could say was, damn.
that was it.
He was
That
in
was
shock, man. He just said, damn.
wow.
So that was the only southern city we worked. Everything else was up north.
I got to see Nat work at a place my father was the co-manager of, called the Royal Tahitian in Southern California in Ontario. And him and Louis Armstrong worked there. Did you ever work with Louis?
Yeah, I did. I did a TV show with him, and I was privileged to spend like 4 days with him. It was one of those TV shows that had sketches in it, and so it was a lot of rehearsal involved. And it's called Hollywood Palace.
No.
And Nick Vanoff was the producer, and Phil, what's his name? The comic and singer.
Yeah. I can't think. Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was good though. I know you're
Great. He was
thinking of.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was really good. Yeah.
So he was the moderator, and Louis Armstrong was on the show. Diane Carroll was on the show. There are a lot of big stars, and so I got to hang out in Louis Armstrong's dressing room.
Wow.
And talk to him every day, you know, for 4 days. It was like I was, you know, and I had him play my old trumpet.
The one with the tape on it?
Yeah, I had him play a couple notes on it. So
yeah. Did you play for him?
Yeah, you know, when I tell other guys Louis Armstrong played this horn, man, they almost, you know, faint.
I got a great picture with Louis Armstrong with my brother, sister, and cousin sitting on his lap at the Royal Tahitian. And I had located it about 20 years ago. This is like, it was taken 63, 64, and 1981 or something. 83, I found it. And I went to get it touched up. It was an old Polaroid. And somehow in the cab, it flew out the window and I never found that picture. So.
Oh, what a drag.
Yeah.
I have a great one of those pictures that I treasure too, of me and Al Hurt holding that old trumpet.
Yeah.
So I named it The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Well, you've worked with some great performers.
Yeah.
I just want, there are two stories here that I want you to share. First of all, the one, I don't know if it's apocryphal, about Louis Armstrong and Richard Nixon.
Yeah, that's, well, I had heard the story. And so when I talked to Louis about it, I asked him and he said, yeah, true. Louis had a routine that he did every day of his life. He took a Swiss laxative every day in the morning when he got up, and he had a balm that somebody gave him to put on his lips to keep them soft, you know, so his armature, so he wouldn't get chapped lips and blow the trumpet. And he used to smoke a joint every day of his life. He thought everybody did, you know. And so Louis uh, was on a goodwill tour for the State Department. They used to do those, him and his Dixieland band, Barrett Deems on drums, all those guys, you know, and they'd go to like Russia and they'd do a concert. They'd have 50,000 people. And then they go to Ukraine and do a show, 50, everywhere they went, they were like heroes. And so he was doing one in the Far East, and he bought a bunch of Thai sticks, you know, and dope there because it was like 50 cents or something like that. And he had it in his carry-on bag. Well, Louis, when he gets to customs at an airport, everybody knows him in the world. You know, he's an international figure. Louis lands in New York at the airport, and they all say, "Hey, Satchmo, how you doing?" They all hug him and shake his hand. Nobody ever checks his bags. So Louis was coming back. He landed at JFK. In those days, it was Idlewild. He landed there, and he had his bag of dope, and there was a big line of people. They were looking for something big time, maybe spy stuff or diamonds or something, but they're going through suitcases. They're taking heels off shoes. I mean, they're doing everything. They have strip searches, and I mean, and so here Louis is in line, and he's saying, "Oh my God, you know, it's the end of my career. They're going to find all this dope. I have enough to be called a dealer." And so he was terrified, man. And so just before he got to customs, just a couple people before, as if it was God's will, man, the door opened on the other side, like 50 yards from where they were. And you could hear a helicopter blade out there, and guys with suits walked in, and then walked Richard Nixon, who was coming to New York to do a speech at the UN. And he came in, and everybody applauded, and he gave his victory sign, and he looked around, and he saw Louis Armstrong, and he walked over, and he said, "Hey, Satchmo, where you coming from?" And Louis said, "Hey, Pops," he said, "we've been in Thailand blowing some sounds for Uncle Sam." And Richard Nixon, the president, and reached down and grabbed the bag of dope and said, "Come on, Satch, you don't have to stand in line," and accompanied Louis Armstrong with the bag of dope through customs. And I know that if I die and go to heaven, on God's refrigerator is a picture of that, you know, stuck with a magnet on the refrigerator. Because it was Nixon Agnew who did this whole thing about the young generation is, you know, smoking dope and ruining everything. And so, yeah, that's a true story.
That's just an amazing story.
Yeah.
Man. It really is. So that story, I want to get back to Nat King Cole. One that I know that you drove around. I know that you flew him first class, but you also drove around to some of these gigs. You know,
well, only about two of them.
There's the story about some little mishap that happened in the car.
Yeah, we were in the car because the next jump, we're in the Midwest, and the next jump was 110 miles. And Nat said, "You know what? By the time we get to the airport and get on the plane and fly there and get from the airport back to the town where we're going," he said, "we're better off driving. I'm just going to get a car and the two of us will drive down." I said, "Great." So Nat started driving, and we were talking about being on the road in the old days. I was telling him we went on the road. We had no money. We left Scranton with the millionaires in the 50s to go to Jackson, Mississippi. And so we stopped at a store. We bought a loaf of bread, a jar of mustard, which is cheap, you know, and a pound of bologna. And we ate that all the way down there. And for the first couple of days we were there, that was the only food we had. And so I was talking to Nat, and Nat said, "Yeah, we used to do that too. We're on the way." And we got this talk. So Nat said, "Pull into the store here." So he went in, he bought a couple of cans of soda, and he bought, you know, some lunch meat and a loaf of bread. And he said, "Get this too." He grabbed a can of sardines. "Get this too. I love put sardines right on the sandwich, man." So he said, "You drive." So I was driving. He didn't get a fork or anything. So he opened the bread. He was sitting on the passenger side, and he was putting the mustard on with his finger on the sandwich, you know, and they put a slice of bologna on. Then he said, "Wait now, put the thing in his lap, the bologna sandwich." And he opened the can of sardines, and he took a couple out. He put the can up on the dashboard. And not 10 seconds later, some idiot pulled out in front of me, and I hit the brakes and swerved, and the can of sardines flipped right onto Nat's lap, the open can of sardines. So it was, the rest of the trip was not very pleasant, man.
Yeah, I remember you guys did not talk the rest of the way.
Yeah,
Um,
the
but
only good thing about Nat was that he was still just he to him he was just a piano player who got lucky. He never had that big star ego or anything. You know,
you
I got to tell you this one story. You'll appreciate this. We're working the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles at the time uh, came in with his family, and he came backstage, and I met him, and that introduced me to him. And he said, "You guys want to go and see some games? We have 3 home games in a row, which is really rare." He said, "So if you want, you know, if they didn't have celebrity boxes in those days, he said, but I'll give you my seats on the 50-yard line." And Nat said, "Great, you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, we were there for a month, and so we went to 3 games. And so the first game we went to, uh, we bought a hot dog and, you know, in the stands and ate it. But when we pulled up in a limo, limos were rare in those days. We pulled up to the stadium in a limo, and Nat said, "Now, whatever you do not stop walking. That's the important thing." So we get out of the car, and the crowd gathers. The limo's, "Oh my God, it's Nat King Cole," and everybody's got programs that they want him to sign, and you know, and sign my book. And you know, and so Nat is signing while he's walking, and so we just barely get into the stadium in time for the game. The second week was the same deal. The third week, the chef said to us in the club, "What do you guys eat?" He said, "Well, we have a hot dog." "No, no, I'm going to make you some prime rib sandwiches. You take it along." And so he made these beautiful sandwiches, and he put them in a cooler. So he came out with the cooler, and he put the cooler in the back seat, you know, and Nat got in the front seat, and he said, "You sit in the back, hold that cooler so it doesn't fall on the floor." So we get to the stadium, and we get out of the car, and people gather around the limousine again, and somebody screams out, "Look, it's Mitch Miller." They saw me in the back with the goatee. They said, "It's Mitch Miller." And the crowds are gathering around, and Nat was laughing. To him, that was the biggest release and the most fun he's ever had, man. He started yelling, "It's Mitch Miller, it's Mitch Miller." And people were giving me things to sign. So I was signing Mitch Miller, and we were walking, and somebody yelled out, "Look, he's got his boy with him." You know, and that was like my boy, you know. And that was saying, "Yowza, Mr. Miller, come on." He was laughing. To him, that was like, it was an episode for him.
Yeah, wow. I worked with his brother Ike Cole in Chicago at the Playboy Club in 1977. I think I didn't work with him. I worked in a room, and he actually worked a piano bar there. And I
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
go in and watch him. Really, a very nice guy, but he was the guy who didn't get lucky. He sounded a lot like Nat, but that was a very special, talent, wasn't he?
Oh boy, he was incredible, and he was so conscientious, Randy. Whenever he did a foreign language album, and he did a couple of them, you know, records, not whole albums. He did French and Italian, and he would go to a language specialist, and so that he would pronounce every word exactly legitimately, so that people wouldn't be offended by a black guy singing in their language. You know, he was really conscientious about it, and his piano playing was scary. I mean, most people think he just played a little piano, but Oscar Peterson told me Nat King Cole was the most important piano player of the generation. He changed the way people voice the chords, and he took it from the Art Tatum style, which was all technique and harmonics, up to a new level. Nat King Cole was a hero to every piano player.
How was he? I mean, we had Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier were involved in the civil rights movement. Where did Nat come in?
Nat didn't believe in the marches, and not that he didn't believe in them. He just didn't want to take part in the marches. And we did a fundraiser at the Shrine Auditorium in L.A. It's a huge place, and we did the show free. Nat paid the band, he paid everybody, me and all the dancers, he out of his own pocket. And he did the show, and they got 100% of the proceeds, and he divided it between the NAACP, CORE, and there was one other group. He divided and gave them all the money, and they came backstage. Uh, what's the big magazine in those days? The big black magazine.
Jet?
Yeah, Jet. They came backstage, and another magazine, I think it was called Sepia or something like that. They all came backstage to interview Nat. It was right before the big march in Selma. and they came backstage and they said, they cornered Nat, and Nat grabbed me and quick says, "Come on, you got to cover me on this." So the guy was right in Nat's face, and he said, "Are you going to go?" Oh, it was in Washington. The march was in Washington. "Are you going to go to Washington for the march?" And Nat said, "No." He says, "I won't be able to do that." He said, "But we all have our own way of demonstrating. Mine is to hold this benefit tonight, and use my celebrity, whatever I have, to raise money, because it's going to take money to put on these marches, buses to get people there and everything." And the guy said, "No, that's not enough. You have to march." And Nat said to me, "What's our schedule like? When is that?" And and I just made something up. Oh, I said, "We're in Fargo, North Dakota, for 3 nights, Nat, and we won't be able to do that, And the guy was, "No, you have to cancel. You have to be there." And Nat was saying, "No, and Nat was trying to be a gentleman, and the guy got really, really, really pushing, got right in Nat's face, and he says, "Are you going to march or aren't you?" And Nat looked at him and got just as mean faced to him. And he said to the guy, he says, "Let me put it this way, my feet hurt." End of interview.
That was it, huh?
Well, it was Ebony magazine. Ebony magazine.
Right. Hey, was it Phil Foster you were talking about, by the way?
No, Phil. What the heck? He married Alice Faye.
Yeah, well, Mike can look it up right now, and he can tell you. All right, Mike can look who that person was, because it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, me too, because I know him real well. I did a bunch of things with him.
I know him. I think, yes, he was really one of those, like, down home types, right? He was.
Yeah, but his humor wasn't hokey. Like, his humor was very hip. He said to me once, I was doing a telethon in Vegas, and he was there, and I said, "Uncle Phil, you're going to sing a song for us?" He said, "No." He said, "But I brought Joe Venuti, the violinist, and Joe will give a pledge. Joe will play any song in the world on the violin." And so somebody handed me a note. It was from Carmen Cavallero, who was a piano player, an old piano player in the old movies. And Carmen was a smart guy. Carmen bought a bunch of land in San Fernando Valley when it was like, $100 an acre. So he was a millionaire. Yeah. And Carmen Cavallero said, "I'll pledge $100 if Joe Venuti plays Hot Canary on the violin." So I said to Phil Harris, that's
it, Phil Harris.
I said to Phil, "Is Carmen Cavallero good for $100? And Phil said to me, "Carmen Cavallero's got enough money to burn a wet elephant." Wow. What a hip line. It's the picture of somebody trying to do that. Yeah, he was special.
He's a great storyteller. You don't see great storytellers today. He was a great storyteller. And you're great. I mean, it really is a rare quality to tell, like you have today. Some of these anecdotes, you have to have a lot of patience, though. A lot of comics don't have the patience to. Yeah, what's the key to it, Pete?
Well, if they're not getting a laugh every 30 seconds, then they feel like they're in trouble. But I have some routines that go on. And I did one on the Tonight Show once when Peter LaSalle came to me and said, "Look, that idiot took up 2 whole segments. So we're real short. Either you can go out and do like 1 joke or go to the panel, whatever." I said, "No, I'll just go out and do 1 joke." And I did one of those Shaggy Dog things about pioneers going across the country. And I was explaining the covered wagon, and the rope that held the barrels on the side was 3/4 inch tow rope out of a leased special material. And the barrel was made. And I was asking questions all the time. I was asking Carson and Ed McMahon. I said, it was like there was a chrome rim along the side about 3/4 of an inch wide. It had some small Phillips head screws in it. And I was just going on and on. And of course, the crew knew what I was doing. I was just running into a time where they're going to have to cut something else out of it. But they were all laughing. It was they were in stitches because they knew what I was doing.
I had the rare pleasure working with you many times.
Well, sure.
I want to get back to Seattle in a few minutes because I remember working with you there at a very special fundraiser. But I want to play one of your routines here first, and this is a classic, and this is the short version of you telling the Somewhere Over the Rainbow story. Oh, yeah. All right, we're going to play that.
I want to credit him with this joke he told me. His name is Pete Myers, an excellent writer, and he told me a brilliant joke. It's kind of a musician joke, but everybody will understand it. And it's the real kind of the story of life. It's about a saxophone player who moved to London, and boy, he just wasn't getting any work. I mean, things were really going bad for him, you know, and so he just every day just sit around the house and practice his horns. And one day he woke up and it had stopped raining in London. And boy, this was like a whole new thing to him. And he threw open the window, and down from one end of the horizon to the other, the most magnificent rainbow. It was like God saying to him, the whole world is going to change. And he stared at it for what seemed like hours. And he looked down, and there was his tenor sax, and the sun sort of glistening. And he thought, dare I, or would it be that too melodramatic? And he said, no, I don't care. This is real. He picked up the horn, threw open the window, and started playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow on his saxophone. Somewhere, really play. And a crowd started to gather down below. They could hear him, and they said, that's magnificent. And the crowd got bigger. And he got to the middle part of the song, you know, the bridge, and he forgot it. He says, well, he said, you don't know how it happened. Like, he had never forgotten it before. He said, well, I'll start at the beginning again. Maybe I'll remember it this time. And he started at the beginning somewhere, and he got to the middle again, just drew a blank. He said, he didn't know what to do. He couldn't, and the people down below started saying, play the middle part. They started to get hostile. And he said, wait a minute, man, I forgot it. They said, play it. And he said, oh, wait, I'll try it. He went from the beginning again like 20 times. He gets to the middle part, call it the bridge, and he couldn't remember it. And the people were getting hostile. Play it, you turkey! So he said, I don't know. And he threw the saxophone out, and they started to boo. And this was all he could take because the beginning of the day was so magnificent. And he threw himself out the window and hit the pavement and broke. And boy, in his last couple seconds on earth as he was passing on to his reward, man, the ambulance pulled up, and the siren on the ambulance was going doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
All right, so there it was, man. That was the Somewhere Over the Rainbow short version. How long could you actually stretch that one out?
Oh, yeah, it goes on and on. You know, you're explaining the weather and the hotel room and everything. But, you know, this happens sometimes. You know, somebody will tell you a joke, and then you tell somebody else a joke, and then by the time it gets to exponential ratios, you get to a point where you forgot where it came from. Well, some guy, about 2 weeks after I did that joke on the show, about 2 weeks later, some actor came on. He was doing his thing, and he said to Johnny, you know, I never tell jokes, but I heard this great joke. And he started the joke, and the band started to boo, and Carson grabbed him and said, don't go any farther. He said, Pete Barghouti was on and did that a couple of weeks ago. The guy was embarrassed, but he didn't know. He didn't see the show. He didn't know where the joke came from. But that just tickled everybody so much because you know, everybody knows Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and it's one of those things where
Yeah. The other one here, and I want you to tell this story, the shorter version of it, because I always quote you this one. My favorite story is the Toscanini story, where he's in. All right, can you just give us the moderate version of that one?
Well, somebody comes to Toscanini, who was the greatest conductor that ever lived. They came to him, NBC Philharmonic. They came to him and said, this son of one of our biggest donors wrote this 3-piece concerto. And Toscanini said, wait a minute, this is not amateur hour. We don't do stuff like that. And, you know, but the guy gives millions, and he stays after Toscanini and finally convinces Toscanini. He said, look, at least try it. And if it's no good, we'll throw it out and we won't be bothered again, you know. Okay, so they play it, and the third movement has in the trumpet section, there's a jazz movement in there that lasts quite long, and the symphony guy plays all the notes, but not the right feel, and Toscanini knows it. And he says, look, we just can't do this. This requires somebody else to do that. So I said, well, why don't we hire one jazz trumpet player? And Toscanini says, oh, no way. They're slovenly. That their execution is not what I need for the rest of the concert. They have a discipline problem. We don't want that. And anyway, the money ante goes up, and so he brings in one brother from the village, guy with a goatee, his horns in a paper bag. He sits down, looks up, says, anytime you're ready, Pops. Toscanini is mad at him before they start, but they get to this place, and he plays so beautifully. Toscanini wants to compliment the guy, and he walks back. The guy puts the horn in the paper bag and says, later, second day of rehearsal. same thing. Shows up at the last minute, doesn't warm up, takes the horn out of a paper bag, outplays the rest of the orchestra. Just a genius. And he puts the horn in the bag, says, "Later, Pops." Third day, the afternoon of the concert that night, he comes in and same thing, sits down, plays brilliantly. And Toscanini says, "Wait a minute, before you leave, I got to tell you something. Your playing has been miraculous, and you've actually moved me to tears. And I want you to know you changed my whole opinion of jazz musicians." And the cat says to Toscanini, "I figure that's the least I can do, man, seeing as how I can't make the gig tonight." Everybody knows
That's the story. All right.
Everybody knows one of those guys, you know.
Yeah, that is really all right. We're talking with Pete Barbuti. We're going to take a quick break here. This is Joe Williams with the Woody Herman Band, and we'll be back to talk about him and many others.
All of me, or why not take all of me? Oh, can't you see that I'm no good without you? Oh, take my lips, I want to lose them. And take my arms, I'll never use them. Your goodbye left me with eyes that cry. How can I go on without you? You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? Why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good without?
That is a tribute to Woody Herman that
Yeah.
Pete Barbuti, our special guest, emceed. Seemed like he had a good time.
Yeah, well, Joe was one of the special people in the world. You know, you met him. He was just he was a gracious man. He was intelligent. He was incredibly talented, man. He was special.
I met him and his wife. I forgot her name. Was it Ruth or
Jillian.
Jill? That's right. And I met
Right.
her. And, you know, one of the great gigs I had, and it was a benefit that UNLV played Washington State University.
Our first Division I game for UNLV.
Yes. And the quid pro quo was that you had to raise some money
Yeah.
for the boosters up there. It was at Spokane, right? Yes,
Right.
Washington State. So he went up there, and it may have been the only time, Pete, because you know where I am politically, where I got the chills listening to someone sing the national anthem, because he sang the national anthem
Yeah,
at
a
that game.
cappella. Yeah, at the game. And everybody, man, everybody felt the same way. That was special.
Yeah, it really was. And then he did this tune the night before. I want to make love to your mind before I make love to your body.
Yeah.
The longest named tune ever, right?
Yeah, boy, he could sing, he could do ballads, he could do anything.
Yeah, it was really great. You work with him a lot?
Yeah, I did. And he was one of the greatest people. He was just so gracious. You know, when we did that gig, if you remember, the trio was a piano player named Arnie Crothers, who was paralyzed on the left side. Arnie had a very bad stroke. And so he played everything with one hand on the piano. And the bass player was Noel Waters, and the drummer was Tom something or other. But we were going to rehearsal. We were walking down this flight of stairs. And I said to Joe Williams, I said, "Joe, I want to tell you out front before we get down there so you're not shocked. The piano player, his left side is paralyzed. He only plays with one hand." And Joe started laughing so convulsively that he thought I was putting him on. And he had to stop and sit down on the stairs. And he kept saying, "Stop it. Don't tell me, stop it." You know. Anyway, we got down there and he took a look at Arnie. And he saw him, it was one side with me. And he had a funny look on his face. And then after rehearsal, he said to me, "If that guy wants to go on the road, I'll use him as a piano player any day of the week." That's how good he was with one hand.
Wow.
He was a freak of a player. He was unbelievable.
George Shearing was blind, right?
Yeah, blind. Yeah, blind from birth. George was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's amazing how these guys can play. What is it? Something genetic that they can play something like this instrument, the piano, which has got to be the most difficult instrument to
Boy,
play.
I'll tell you, when I first went to Spokane, at the Stockyards Inn, some little girl came in. She was sitting at the bar there. She said, "You like jazz, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." Well, there's a piano player in town named Arnie Crothers. You should go and see him. And I thought to myself, how dare she say that? I was just working with Mike Woodford, who was a brilliant player, and I had to work with other great piano players. And now she wants me to go see some guy in Spokane, like I want to see that. Anyway, she kept at it, and so I went to see Arnie, and he sounded like Oscar Peterson. He killed me. And then she said, "There's another guy in town." I said, "There can't be two of them." And she took me to hear a guy named Joe Close, who later became my piano player. He was a monster of a player. He ended up conducting for Jack Jones for a long time.
Wow.
So
Jack Jones.
Yeah.
Jack Jones. Now, I want to get to that story because he was one of the few that wouldn't cross the picket line in 1991 when the musician strike happened, right?
Jack came in and did the benefit along with Ed Asner came up, who was real hot at the time, had that big series on.
Right.
And who's the old guy? Wilford Brimley came up too.
Yeah.
Sang a song, had a beautiful chart written by Don Bagley, a beautiful arrangement with strings and everything, and sang a couple tunes.
I was working at the Sands Hotel in that Marty Krofft show at the time.
Yeah.
And so that was really a lot of fun doing that. And Jack Jones is really one of the great singers, underrated.
Probably the best singer that ever lived, but for whatever reason, never became the biggest star. But Jack has what you call absolute pitch. I mean, if you hit a piano, the middle A is 440 vibrations a second, and if you hit a middle note, Jack can tell you if it's off or if it's sharp or flat or something. He's like his ear is just phenomenal. He's the best.
Well, listen, I wanted to just show you that I have Bianca here. All right. I want to make sure she made a cameo. There she is. All right. She wants to get down now. All right. There she goes. 14 years old.
Yeah, we have an old one too.
Yeah. I get you. I don't know if you paid attention to all this drama with me and Roger Stone and the dog.
Yeah, we've been following it, Randy. We're sorry you have to go through that with the guy that has no, one of the few people I've ever heard of who is amoral.
Yeah. He really, you're not a big fan of Stone. You've known about him for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, he put me through the washer, lying about me and all of that. You know what I mean? Pulled me into it. And it was a nightmare. No one knows me as a comedian. All right. They just don't know me as a comedian. But one of my favorite rooms of all time, Pete, was the Casbah Theater.
Yeah.
At the Sahara Hotel.
You're from California too? Okay. I didn't tell you this is true now. This really happened. I got a buddy of mine. He's got a dog, Great Dane. He's a beautiful dog too. You know what I mean? They're gentle. They're big, but they're gentle. You'd be afraid of them, but they're nice dogs. Okay, all of a sudden the dog started to bite people, bit the mailman, bit the UPS guy who's trying to deliver a package. Who the hell else? He bit somebody else. Who did he bite? He bit somebody else. The meter maid. I bit the meter maid. It was a different place, yeah. He bit her out near Henderson. Okay. Yeah. And this dog, went crazy. So he called the vet and he says, "What the hell am I going to do? I love this dog. He's like family. I don't want to have him destroyed." And the vet says, "You don't have a problem. Bring that dog down to the clinic and we'll neuter him. We'll castrate him and he'll be real peaceful." So he puts the leash on a dog. He's taking him to the clinic. It's not too far, He gets about halfway. The dog breaks the leash, goes running down the road, jumps on some poor wino in a door stoop, bites the bejiminies out of the wino, almost killed the poor wino. And the guy gets there and pulls the Great Dane off, and he says to the wino, he says, "Geez, I feel terrible about this, pal. I swear to God, I never meant for this dog to bite nobody again. In fact, I was just taking him to the vets to have him castrated." And the wino looked up and said, "Why the hell don't you have his teeth pulled? I could tell from a block away he wasn't going to screw me."
growing up in Reno and Tahoe at the Three Saharas, they had really nice lounges. The one in Las Vegas was really special. But you worked the original Casbah, right?
Yeah. It was, Louis Prima started there, the Mary Kay Trio. They started there. Don Rickles started there. That was, those were hallowed boards there, you know.
Now, wait, there was one that preceded the last one, and that was a rectangular room. That wasn't the old Casbah room, right?
That was a terrible room. It was long and skinny, and the audio was set up so that it was too loud down front and they couldn't hear you in the back. It was terrible. Everything was wrong with it. They finally tore it out and built, the one that lasted quite a long time.
Yeah, the lounges. There's something about working those lounges. You worked there at the Casbah. I used to watch Jackie Gale in that room, and I watched a lot of great performers in that.
Rip Taylor used to work there.
Yeah, Rip was there. I worked with Rip. I was in a show called The Pinups. Here, we'll put up that picture of the Pinups with Pete Bar Beauty there. You see?
Yeah.
That's 1979. I was in I filled in for Peter Anthony, who was one of your disciples too. They're all big fans of yours, Pete. But did you work at other lounges in Las Vegas besides the Casbah?
Well, the Thunderbird Lounge. Well, first the New Frontier Lounge, the Cloud 9 Lounge. That was the first one I worked. Then went back. We were there for like 6-7 months, and then left, went on the road, and came back and worked the Thunderbird Lounge for a long time.
Yeah, I worked the Thunderbird Lounge, but at the very end there, when it before it was changed, I think they changed the name or something. But there was that room right by the bar that I worked. That was actually a very nice lounge. But there were so many great lounge acts back then. You mentioned Louis Prima. You had Tommy Bell. You had, you had the Treniers.
Yeah, the Treniers were one of the best ever.
Yeah.
They're just about all gone now. Skip has left. He's a car dealer. He doesn't want anything to do with the business. And I'm not sure, but the saxophone player is. Last I heard, he was like 96 or 97, Don, but I don't know if he's still with us.
Well, wait a second. It wasn't Tommy Bell. It was another
Freddie Bell.
Freddie Bell.
Yeah.
And then you had another group that Babe Pierre was in. The Novelites, was that it? No, that was Carr. That was Frankie Carr.
Yeah, well, the Novelites changed people a lot too. But Babe was with a couple different groups. He was one of the Vagabonds.
That's it, the Vagabonds.
Yeah, but then they broke up, and then Babe went on, worked with a couple other groups. He was a good guy, Babe was.
He really was.
He was a good friend too. He was a nice man.
And a great boxer. He had a boxing ring.
A boxing ring in his backyard. I said, "Why'd you do that?" He says, "Well, everybody has a pool, and I don't want anybody to drown."
Yeah.
So he built a legitimate ring in his backyard, and he would. When pit bosses would get in arguments and things, he would let them come to his house and duke it out for a couple of rounds.
I did it. There was an impressionist. I don't remember his name, but he and I put on a little exhibition there. And I got to tell you something. I went one round. I was so exhausted. It was the most physical. It's like we didn't hurt each other, but I was totally injured by just throwing the blows. You know what I mean? It really was.
Nobody knows that until they've tried that. Yeah, that's an incredible sport. Yeah.
I mean, look, I felt like Joe Frazier after the Thrill in Manila. And that's another story I want to get to. I forgot about that. When you were on the Mike Douglas show, and Joe Frazier was on.
Right before the big fight, man. He interviewed Joe Frazier first, and he stayed on the panel. Then he brought me out, and I did something. Then he brought out this guy who does a comedy act on a trampoline. He pretends he's one of the audience. They have a gymnast come out first and do some things, and then they get this guy out of the audience, and he's really an expert, like they do with the ice capades. They always have one of those guys. It's a plant. So this guy comes out, and of course he's brilliant, and he pretends he's falling and almost dies each time, and then finally, he does a couple of big things, and then Mike Douglas says, "Well, that was so and so," and So he had me and Joe Frazier go back there, and I just bounced a couple of times. But Joe thought since he's an internationally known athlete, he should be able to do better. So he started going real high, and he got near the edge, and he came down, and one leg went in between the trampoline and the guide bar that holds it there, and the springs. And he went over backwards. His head would have hit the floor, and luckily I was standing there, and I caught his head, before he hit the floor. Otherwise, who knows? Maybe the fight would have been canceled or something. And Mike Douglas came over. He was white. And he said to me, "Thank God, man, you were there." Whoa. I mean, he was terrified of the lawsuit.
But didn't Frazier say that he didn't have a problem?
Oh, yeah. He says, an athlete, he said, we have strong legs. I could have stopped myself. There was no way. It just, he was bending backwards. So, nobody has that kind of strength.
Yeah. But he was some boxer. He was some boxer, man. He used to wear like boxer trunks or shorts that would go down past his knees, way down there, almost like pants.
Yeah.
But Ali was the best, and I got to see some of those fights. There was a guy, Davies Locker, who was a referee in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah. Now, Davy Pearl.
Davy Pearl. Yeah.
That was his name. Yeah, he was a referee. He did a lot of those fights.
Yeah, he did the Ron Lyle fight.
Yeah, he was also the head of the Booster Club that got us that gig in Spokane.
One of the greatest gigs ever. I want to thank you once again about
that. We for those people who don't know what we're talking about, I wrote a sketch for us to do because it was a football promo thing. I did it, and the sketch was we had T-shirts made up, and one had University of Washington State, one had UNLV, one had NC2A inspector, and then Joe Williams wore one that said black athlete. And we did this sketch about, we kept trying to convince him, we'd say, if you come to Las Vegas, we have a private jet, we can fly you to Los Angeles anytime you want to go. And then the guy from Washington State, which is in Pullman, Washington, actually said, well, we have a Volkswagen, we can take you to Walla Walla on weekends to see the Tulip Festival or something, whatever, it was all jokes like that. And the punchline was, Joe said, where are you going to go? And he said, I'm going to go to Gonzaga. It's good enough for Bing Crosby. It's good enough for me. Gonzaga was in Spokane, so it played well.
They have a good basketball team, right?
Gonzaga every year for some reason.
Yeah, but not this year. They didn't make it to the finals this year. Nobody did.
There's a great, Bing Crosby was a bit of a practical joker, and he grew up in Spokane. And so he donated a ton of money to Gonzaga. I mean, he built buildings and everything. He's a classy guy. But Bing Crosby used to go back to Spokane maybe every 10 years. And he would go and visit all the guys he knew as a kid growing up. And there was one guy who was visually impaired, almost blind, who had a newsstand. And as a kid, Bing Crosby said, we used to steal candy from him, And so he went back and he'd say, whatever his name was, Joe, do you remember me? He'd say, he knew voices. He says, yeah, it's you, Mr. Crosby. He said, no, Bing, not Mr. Crosby, Bing. How you doing? So he said, let me have a newspaper. And he gave him $100, So anyway, when the airport in Spokane is like a fog machine. They share it with an air base up there in Geiger. And the airport is always closed. And so Bing and his manager, Harry, they said, let's get a car. We'll just drive to Seattle. It's only about 4 hours. And we'll have a nice leisurely drive across the country. Then we'll fly out of Seattle. Okay, so they were driving and they got like halfway there to some little town in the middle of Washington, man, the winter wheat belt there. And Bing said, take a right here. And Harry says, oh, come on, Bing. He said, no, take a right. And then went up this dirt road several miles to a farmhouse. And this is 1 o'clock in the morning, So Bing goes up and knocks on the door, and the light turns on upstairs, and the farmer's wife comes down with her ratty robe all bundled up around her. And she opens the door, and there's Bing Crosby standing there with the screen door. He says, good evening, ma'am. I'm Bing Crosby. I wonder if I could have a glass of water. And she looks at him and says, well, you do look just like him. He says, I can assure you I'm Bing Crosby. I wouldn't mind singing a couple tunes for you. And He said, remember this one? I'm dreaming of a white. Oh yeah, that was me. And my theme song used to be When the Blue, and they sing. And she'd get him a glass of water, and then he'd leave, and she'd go upstairs, and her husband would say, "Who was at the door?" And that would start it. You know, she'd say Bing Crosby, and there'd be this long, like a sitcom. You know, he'd say, "What are you talking about, Bing Crosby?" It's the middle of the night. You know, and she'd go on. She'd tell the neighbors, and they'd ask her husband, "Was Bing Crosby?" "No, Bing Crosby." And he knew that he had started a controversy that would go on maybe for generations. You know.
So he's really there. I wonder
Yeah.
if he's saying, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" His rendition was the best.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
if there wasn't a Bing Crosby, there wouldn't have been a Frank Sinatra. You know, he's the guy who broke the ice. He started singing that way and crooning, call it, and then Sinatra came along, and it was acceptable because Bing did it.
He was one of the richest guys in Hollywood. It was him. This is really amazing. It was him and Bob Hope, which you would expect. But the other one was Fred McMurray.
Yeah. A lot of them bought property. Carmen Cavallero was in there too. A bunch of those guys. In the old days, they bought property in San Fernando Valley, which was all, wild dogs and cats and mountain lions and everything. Nobody lived out there. They used to have a Paul Whiteman, who had the orchestra, the most famous orchestra,
Right.
and he bought a mansion that Clara Bow built, the old actress from The Silence.
Right.
He bought a mansion out there, had a big pool and everything, and they would party out there. And it was a long drive. It took like an hour and a half to get out there because it was dirt road. But they'd party out there. When Bing used to go to the Orient a lot, and by ship, because in the old days, I don't think any airplane could fly directly. But Bing brought back a gong, which was like 8 feet in diameter. It was massive. It cost like $20 in those days, and they hung it from a tree outside this mansion. And whenever anybody was setting up a party, they'd ring this gong. You could hear it almost down to San Diego, this real dull sound. And everybody would jump in their car and go out to the party there.
Wow, that's something. That's right out of Chinatown when they brought the water to L.A. and the price went up on everything.
Yeah, same. Well, all those old guys did that, and they first found oil, and everybody said, "Oh, there's not much there," and of course they all started drilling. But those stories, those old guys, Art Linkletter was maybe one of the most successful of all of them.
Yeah.
He told me this one story which always fascinates me. When Disney was building Disneyland in Anaheim, he wanted to build it in Hollywood, but the Chamber of Commerce, in their infinite wisdom, said, "We don't want some stupid Ferris wheel or roller coaster in Hollywood." So Disney went down. He bought old orange groves or something down in Anaheim. And he started building Disneyland. He put his own money. It wasn't a public corporation. Put his own money in. I guess NBC put a little money into it because he had the show Wide World of Disney on NBC. And when he got finished, the cost overruns were staggering. He was broke. And if it wasn't a success, Disney said he'd be drawing cartoons again. But he called Art Linkletter. I say, "Need somebody to be a master of ceremonies for the television of the opening. To stand here and say, this is the zoo, and here's the animal, here's the Mount, whatever, the Matterhorn, and you go on this." And, so Art Linkletter, well, Disney said, "We've been friends a long time, but," he says, "I need you to give me a break on the price because I'm really tapped out." And without consulting anybody or talking to anybody, Art Linkletter said to him, "Okay, I'll tell you what, Walt," he says, "give me the Kodak film concession at Disneyland for 10 years, and I'll do it for scale." And Disney said, "Yeah, I don't care who sells the film. Sure, you can do it." And so Art Linkletter had the Kodak film concession at Disneyland. And I said to him,
kidding me.
No. I said, "You know how much money was involved?" He says, "I don't have any idea. I can tell you this. Every year for the 10 years, I got a plaque from Kodak saying I was the largest distributor of Kodak film on earth." He says, "And there was an accounting firm in Beverly Hills on Wilshire Boulevard." He says, "It's only a 2-story building, but it's a half a block long." He says, "It was their only account. They used to deliver it in semis a couple times a day, film."
I have been to Disney, not in a long time, but when I was a kid, I went there at least twice a year. But Now it's like $300 to get
Yeah,
in.
I know. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Well, in
but,
those days, you used to buy the book. Remember, there was the
Right.
A ticket was for like the Matterhorn and something else, and then the B ticket was, and the C ticket was the Magic Cup ride, or
yeah, and the E-ticket was the Pirates of the Caribbean or the
yeah, something like
submarine,
that.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember seeing uh, film
About
kiosks
about
everywhere.
about every 50 yards there was a little kiosk that sold film. And when you go to Disneyland and the kids are climbing a tree or something, or you don't run up and say, how much is your film? You run up and you say, quick, give me 2 rolls of this and a roll of that, and you
Yeah.
pop it in your camera. You don't care what it costs,
Yeah.
So it was retail. And film is, a roll of film weighs what, maybe 2 ounces,
Right.
if a lot, a 35 millimeter film, like it, maybe 3 ounces tops. So how many rolls of that can you put in a semi? Maybe
Uh,
a couple 100,000 or 1 million, and they
yeah.
would deliver it. And it doesn't go bad. In fact, the printing on the box is like a joke. It'll say used before, 20 years from now or something like that.
But now I guess that business is dead with everybody walking around with their cell phone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everybody takes pictures with their cell phones now.
Yeah. We're talking with Pete Bar Beauty. Pete, I want to, you mentioned in the very beginning of this first of 2 or maybe 3 interviews, because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. You mentioned Steve Allen.
Yeah.
Steve Allen was a genius.
Yeah, he was the guy who started every talk show today. That format was created by Steve Allen, a desk with chairs and a band. He created that. There was never, the predecessor was called the Broadway Open House. Buddy Lester and Dagmar, the busty blonde, they used to host it. And it was just like a variety show. And then when Steve Allen took over, he decided to have a desk and the chairs and to have the band.
Why did he leave that show?
Well, they just moved it to LA. He wanted to move back to California. And incidentally, Steve Allen, Steve had written a lot of songs, and some were big standards. This could be the start of something big. Everybody recorded that. I think he wrote the lyrics to the Gravy Waltz and It's Impossible. Perry Como had a big hit on that. And he had a lot of residuals coming in. So when he took the deal, NBC for the Tonight Show in New York, he took, in those days, salaries were not very much. So he might have been making like $3,500 a week, to host it, where now it's, 20,000 a night or something. But he took that job and he said, look, I don't need any more than like 1,500 a week because I have this other money coming in. So put the rest of the money into a stock, into an escrow account. And somebody said to him, well, what kind of stocks? He said, well, you have a broker pick them out. I said, this one that looks interesting called Polaroid. It was $1 a share with the original Polaroid camera. Because remember, you had to take the film out and you had to hold it under your arm to warm it up. Then you had to wax it, and, and mount it on cardboard. And later they got into the color film and it got better and better. Well, the stock went up to like $100 and split. So he made a ton of money off that.
Well, listen, I don't know why you had to bring up the Polaroid, because that's the picture, the film that was used when I got that picture with Louis Armstrong. All right. So we had a Polaroid camera as well, but there was a guy that took pictures at the Royal Tahitian, and I got pictures with a lot of people, Maury Wills and, everybody worked there. I'm going to put up a little shot of the menu, but Bobby Darin was the last person to work there. Bobby Darin.
Is that right? Yeah.
He was married to, was it Jane Meadows?
No, Bobby Darin was married to...
No, I'm talking about Steve Allen.
Yeah, he's married to Jane Meadows.
Yeah. He did a show. He was so talented. He's the first one, see this show Politically Incorrect, which I, was really a takeoff or ripoff maybe of a show he did called Meeting of Minds. Do you remember that show?
Very well. I was there for, I think, the first one. He did it to an empty audience because he didn't know what the reaction would be. What he did is he picked a group of character actors out of Hollywood, people who had a lot of experience, and he gave them each an identity. He said, you will be Croce. You will be Whitehead. You will be Sigmund Freud from different eras. You will be Nero. You will be, Caligula. But they were all from different eras. And so they dressed, he had wardrobe dressed them in the period so they looked like the person. And each one of them studied the philosophy of that particular person.
Well, I saw one where his wife played Marie Antoinette and Roscoe Lee Brown played Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
So, and that was such a great show, and it didn't last that long, but it was part of it. Huh?
Westinghouse didn't like the idea. It was too controversial. They were the producers of his show when he moved to LA, and they kept asking him not to do that, but he insisted on doing it. Because on the one show that I saw, they discussed crime and punishment. And one of the philosophers said there should be no such thing as punishment. Said criminals shouldn't be punished. They should be studied or whatever. There should never be a penal institution or anything. And Westinghouse said, you can't say that on the air. And Steve tried to reason with him, say, look, we're not saying it as if we're just saying that this is how this guy thought. And we're allowing the other people to question that. And it would be a serious discussion.
Yeah.
But
maybe it was Jeremy Bentham who was against prisons. Maybe that utilitarian philosopher. Even Aaron Burr was very good back in his time on prisons. He was looking for ways, alternatives to prison.
Yeah.
But today that show would be a very hot show, and I hope that PBS puts it back on because it was on PBS. But we're going to close. Anything else about Steve Allen as a talent?
Yeah, he had an insight. He was not a friendly guy. In fact, we had a long talk one night about friendship. He thought there was a formula for being a friend, and he analyzed everything. He burned his hand once, and he was driving to the clinic to get something on, and he held it out the window and it helped. So for a long time, he was writing these things to all these laboratories saying, why does moving air alleviate a burn, the sensation? There must be something. I mean, he was that kind of a guy. He carried a tape recorder with him and recorded every idea that he ever came up with. And he was that kind of a guy, and he wasn't friendly. In fact, the two writers who wrote the show, they called him Stiff Allen. And I didn't know why until he went off the air. The reason he went off the air is there was a business with a girl singer on the show, and his wife found out, and the girl singer was a bit erratic and came at him with a pair of scissors or something, and during the show, and it became a scandal. And so Westinghouse they said either take off Meeting of the Minds or they invoked the morals clause. And so Steve Allen had $1 zillion anyway, so he just said, hey, take a hike. He tried to come back and it didn't work. And one of the writers said to me, you can't get off the world and get back on. And it's true, he tried to come back. And when I saw him, I hadn't seen him for a long time. And he's the first guy to have me on TV he did the liner notes on my first album. He's very gracious to me. And I hadn't seen him for years. And they said, he's doing a new show. Would you do it? And I said, I'll crawl there. And so I went to do the show and was in the dressing room, and he came in and he said, hey, how you doing? And we shook hands. And he said, do you want some orange juice? And I said, no, thanks. And there was nothing else to talk about.
That was it. I know somebody that co-hosted a show with him, and they were very gregarious during their discussions. It was a talk show, and all the way through for the whole hour. But he said as soon as the show ended, they didn't talk at all.
Yeah, he was a very, he was I want to call him a private guy, but he had so many admirers. He was incredibly talented, and he was a nice guy. He wasn't mean or rude to anybody, and he was just a good guy.
Yeah.
But that was just a quirk of his.
All right, maybe we'll play something by him. Unless you have, we're coming to the end of our first discussion, our conversation with my mentor, one of the great influences over me, because I used to watch you almost every night when I worked that show in the lounge up in Reno. up in Tahoe or in Las Vegas, I would watch you all the way through. And it was just to watch you work that room. You had routines, but you really worked off the top of your head, and you worked the audience really well. And you always had a great trio behind you. But you're the consummate performer, and you never use foul language.
Yeah, well, I never have,
You know, which is something is rare. You never. It's hard to watch an act today on YouTube. I don't watch or on the Comedy Central. Not that I ever watch them, but who doesn't use a lot of four-letter words?
Yeah. That's just shock value. It's not. Buddy Hackett had a theory. He said, if it's funny, it's not dirty, and if it's dirty, it's not funny. So that's sort of it.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Buddy Hackett on our next conversation, and Johnny Carson and all the other performers that work Vegas, and talk about the early days of Las Vegas and how it's transformed into something I don't recognize now. Even I went there in 1975, and it was, and you were there, 13 years earlier. And I want to talk about Joe Delaney and a whole bunch of others, but we're going to make that a part 2 here. So why don't you just pick a tune to take us out with that you like?
Just do something by Joe Williams. That's good enough. You can't beat that.
All right, we'll do another one by Joe Williams. All right, we've been talking to Pete Barbuti. I will be right back with some closing thoughts. And thank you once again, Pete.
You're welcome, Randy. Thank you.
Every day I had a blues. Every day I have a blues. When you see me worry, baby, it's you I hate to lose. When nobody loves me, nobody seems to care. Nobody loves me, nobody seems to care. Speaking of bad luck and trouble, you know that I have my share. I'm gonna pack my suitcase, moving on down the line. Oh, I'm packing up my suitcase and moving down the line. Well, there ain't nobody worrying and there ain't nobody crying. It seems to me that every day I have the blues. Every day I have the blues. See me worry, baby, because it's you I hate to lose. Nobody loves me. Nobody seems to care. Nobody loves me. Nobody seems to care. Speaking of bad luck and trouble, you know I have my share. Oh, Elma, I'm packing up my suitcase. I'm moving down the line, yeah. Ain't nobody worrying, ain't nobody crying. Every day I have the blues, I have the blues. Every day I have the blues, I have the blues. Every day you see me worry, baby, cause it's you I don't wanna lose. Every day I have blues. Every day now.
Joe Williams, boy, that story about Seattle or Spokane, really was one of the highlights of my life in show business, working with those two at the same time. Pete Barbuti, really one of the finest. And this is just part one. We're going to bring you part two in a couple of days. So hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to the next, because I haven't even started with him. Wait until you hear the next one. All right, I want to thank Kelly Lane, who is down there in North Carolina. She does all of this now. She does the editing, she does the engineering, all of the Assange shows, and some of the other just live on the fly comedian shows that we've been doing. Kelly Lane has done it all. She's a tireless worker, and she has become because she did not do the editing in the beginning. Our good friend Jimmy Sunderland from Blake Arrowhead did, and then now Kelly does it out of her home in North Carolina. All right, so we're going to go out with, I guess we'll play Nat King Cole. Let's play a little Nat King Cole, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.